often in your life do you find that you are simply operating on autopilot? That's really the question that we are asked to contemplate this week in our Stoic lesson. Hi, I am Amy Yakowski, and I'm here with Rob Hunter and Sierra Ram-Cantrell, and we are Painted Port Strategies. Every week for 52 weeks, we go through and complete a lesson using our Handbook for New Stoics by Massimo Paglucci and Gregory Lopez. And right now we are on week 35, which asks us to question every action. A lot of what we do in our lives is just rote habit. Get up, brush your teeth, take a shower, put on clothes, maybe drive to work, although in this day and age, it's walk to your desk to go to work, probably your long commute from room to room. But really what they want us to do is start to evaluate whether or not what we are doing is benefiting us. Is it the best choice? Is the action that we are acting on in that moment really going to help us in moving forward and moving upward in our mindset and our growth? They talk here, as with every lesson, there is a quote, this one from our boy Marcus Aurelius from Meditations, and I'm not going to read the whole thing, but what he starts off by saying is, of every action, ask yourself, what does it mean for me? And all that simple question is doing is simply creating an opportunity for you to pause and think about what it is you're doing before you actually act upon it. So with this exercise, Rob, Sierra, what were some of the big takeaways that you had just with the setting up of this idea of essentially turning on your 5-year-old self and asking why a lot?
Well, this really kind of speaks to the heart of mindfulness. I circled the opposite of acting out of habit or of impulse. I circled habit and impulse, right? So really, when you think about doing something intentionally, if you've ever hurt somebody, a lot of times your apology might include the word, I didn't intend to hurt you, right? Well, sometimes we just act without really thinking about our true intention. And what they're asking us to do is develop proper mindful habits guided by reason. So instead of just impulse, act, we're going to actually think about, what am I trying to do?
And if you think about it that way, you realize how impulsive we are as human beings, because we don't really taught in school or really anywhere specifically that there's a space between the stimulus and how you react. It's trying to broaden that space, trying to widen that space. And in this exercise, for me, one of the things that they had you do is kind of go through and look at something every day that you can kind of give yourself some space. So one of the ones I wrote was, am I pausing before I speak? Because oftentimes I'm like, oh my God, I want to say something so bad and I want to respond to your comment. But sometimes like, okay, number one, are you done? Have I given you enough space to be able to speak? And then if you say something that irritates me or makes me think or whatever the case may be, am I creating enough space to not react based on my emotion? Because I saw a great meme that said, I'm not responsible for my first thought, but I am responsible for my first action and my second thought. So that's kind of what question every action week 35 seemed to be for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they even talk about here from a cognitive psychology aspect. Daniel Kahneman, he wrote a book called Thinking Fast and Slow. And in that book, he talks about kind of the two types of thinking that you can apply. And he calls it system 1 and system 2. System 1 being fast and instinctive. It's the things that very much are impacted or affected by our emotions, but it can be, they say right here, imprecise. Because it's that initial gut reaction, it's that inherent habitual reaction. It can't always be exactly accurate. To your point, Sierra, I didn't intend to offend. I didn't intend to harm. A lot of times I was just reacting. Whereas system 2 is more logical. It's a little bit slower. It creates that pause, that space. And really what they're trying to have us do is find the balance between both of those. In fact, they even say that through this practice of at least initially, picking one thing each day to pause and ask, why am I doing this? What is the benefit of me doing this? The goal is that over time, those system one impulses, you're kind of conditioning them to become a little bit more system two without creating that large gap or pause in between the two. What is otherwise would have been instinctual has a little bit more logical thought behind it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's a training regimen, really is what it is.
Exactly.
And Albert Einstein was famous for saying, question everything, which of course led him to discover secrets of the universe and other things that he was involved in as well. That's how I looked at this. This is a training part where you think ahead about every action, so it's easier for you to react. So, for example, if you're a basketball player, you shoot free throws. Some people shoot them, I don't know, 50, 100 a day, even professionals, because it's muscle memory at that point. You just go and you shoot and you try to get better every day, but you have to constantly work on it. Like that's the point of training. You have to constantly feed your mind and give yourself enough space to be able to say, okay, what do I want my habits to be? Are they constructive habits? And have I created the right habits for me?
Yeah. Well, and it's the practice of it too. So like, in my house, so our son is homeschooled this year and he's in kindergarten. So a big part of kindergarten is reading, and you're working on not memorizing, they're sight words. So words that you and I are used to seeing all the time, like the word because. Because is kind of a lot of letters. And the first few times you read the word because, you have to really work on it. B-E-C-A-U-S-E. The first few times it's like you've got to because, you got to think about it, you got to separate it out. But now we don't think anything, you see it and you barely even acknowledge it. You've zoomed past it. And I think they're trying to get us to think about this as with enough time of not reacting to system one, which is that immediate emotional response. Eventually that'll become like a sight word. You won't have to think about pronouncing the word because anymore. It will become, you become more adept at it. That muscle gets stronger. That part of the brain gets smarter. So it won't be so difficult after you've practiced not reacting. You've practiced that reason.
I love that. So the exercise that they wanted us to do this week to help us start to practice and condition our system one to become a little bit more system two, that sight word example, I love that, is for every urge that you would otherwise act on, desire, ask yourself, why am I doing this? And will I regret it? And if the answer is yes, then don't do it. And if the answer is no, then the goal is to try to work on making it second nature so that over time you don't have to pause and ask the question, because you have practiced enough that when you have desire A, you know that, yes, this is actually something that I won't regret. So I'm going to move forward with it. But more so recognizing when desire B kicks in and the answer might be, yeah, I might regret this. You have conditioned yourself to not simply just respond and then live with the regret. So for you, they, ask the question only when you have an urge to pursue a desire. And they said it could be small or it could be large. Small, like I have a desire to eat this cookie, or large as I have a desire to buy a new car. Either one you can leverage. So for you, what was your implementation intention for this? What was the way to help you remember to ask yourself the why am I doing this, or will I regret it? What was your implementation intention?
Mine was, what internal desires is action fulfilling? So what part of me really wants to do this and why? Because then if you can figure that out, you're like, aha, I'm starting to figure out some habits. So I recently just concluded a 60+ day non-drinking challenge, no alcohol challenge. And that's really where this kind of question came from, because I wanted to know ultimately, why do I drink? What urges am I going for? Am I doing it because it tastes good, or am I doing it to cover up something, or had a bad day and want to dull the pain of that day? So that's why I started with that question, is when it comes to drinking, or, what would you call that? Your vice. For some people it's smoking, for some people it's watching Netflix, whatever it is. We all have our vices, and they all have a purpose. It's trying to figure out what that purpose is. And are you doing it as a distraction from dealing with difficult things or circumstances? And what I found out was sometimes yes. And sometimes by asking that question, the drinking for me was a way to avoid things, was a way to be social in other aspects, because it's odd when you don't drink and you go to a social event and everybody else is drinking. You're like, this is a very interesting look at drinking. So the peer pressure is to fit in. So you always have another one. And then the entire group sometimes goes in that direction. So what internal desire was that fulfilling? For me, it was being social, being happy, being whatever. So I fit in the group, because I give into peer pressure. I learned that for sure. But not this time. But the 60 days I didn't.
No.
Yeah. What about you, Amy? What was your implementation intention?
So my question was simply asking, why am I doing this and how will this benefit me? I kind of took it and flipped it a little bit, versus not so much will I regret this, because I think that for me, I didn't really connect with that particular question, but I said, will this benefit me? Because I think that's where I can get caught in the desire trap, if you will. Now, granted, sometimes the will it benefit me could be something very small, like if I'm sitting down and watching an episode of a silly television show. Why am I doing this? How will this benefit me? Sometimes the benefit may be just 30 minutes of turning my brain off. And that's okay, because sometimes you need that. So long as it's not trying to escape or delay something that you otherwise should be doing that will benefit you. I think it's okay when it comes to some of those little mini vices to be able to say, you know what, this does actually have a benefit, but I need to make sure that it's a short-term benefit, or I'm capping it. So that way I'm not perpetuating this behavior for, the next 7 hours or what have you.
Did you notice, in thinking about that you found an equilibrium? So, okay, 2 episodes is good. That's basically 44 minutes or something on a non-commercial 22-minute sitcom.
Yeah.
So did you find a number where you're like, okay, 2 is a good break? And is that something you could possibly use during your workday? Because you work from home and you're not working a 9 to 5 schedule. You're sometimes working from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. So is there maybe a lunch break where you sit down and watch 2 episodes of something to make you laugh, or give you some energy, and get back after it?
Yeah, that's a great point. You know what? I didn't sit down and really think about that from the combined or collective, overall. Like, is it 1? Is it 2? Is it just 10 minutes? It was more that particular thing. But I think that's why they want us to practice this. So maybe initially you're treating each desire, each urge in isolation, but then ultimately over time, you want to look at the cumulative effect of, what you're doing, the action that you're taking, and whether or not that desire subsides, or if you can say, yes, this does benefit me, but I know that my threshold has been met and I don't need to continue to fill that. I don't need to continue.
But are you tempted to continue too, right?
Right.
So same thing with me, the drink. Am I tempted to have another drink? Yeah, truthfully. But how do you fight that urge? Like, that's the part of the stoicism that we're talking about here is, all right, maybe a drink's okay. Maybe 2 drinks is okay. But is the 5th drink, are you going to regret that? Maybe in the morning, at the very least. Yeah. But maybe that's the drink where you make a fool of yourself and you say something ridiculous, or you try to make a joke. It's not funny. So again, that's another part of this they like, is where's that limit? Sierra, what about you?
So mine was, I took my question really simple. What am I trying to do? So it's funny you just said about make a joke. So as I kind of stepped back, I realized that when I'm in company of certain people that have a very different type of sense of humor than I do, my reactions are not always ones that I like. So There's certain people that I spend time with that their sense of humor is very different in that it's very sarcastic. And if you know me, I am not usually a sarcastic, humored person. In fact, I was always kind of teased for being very just straight up. You would tell me a joke, I would believe you. I would think you were telling me the truth. So that's not my natural sense of humor. But I was finding when I would be with people who would use this sarcastic sense of humor, it was kind of like what I call the like cold water effect. I'm so like, and so I would sort of like add in my own sarcastic comment as a way of like playing along, which I immediately regretted, right? Because number one, that's not really me. I was like trying to fit into this. And then it didn't feel right for me. So I decided that if I think about what am I trying to do, I'm trying to just stay at peace. So if all I'm trying to do is stay at peace, don't react. Don't say anything. Don't participate in humor that doesn't suit you or that you don't need to respond to. I can just smile and laugh and listen, and I don't have to say anything. And then I don't regret it because I haven't said something that wasn't authentic to me. And it actually worked really well for me. And I did remind myself when I was in a certain company where that often is my reaction. I just said, what am I trying to do? I'm trying to just stay peaceful. So just do that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's an odd thing to not respond because, again, that's not something that typically is socially acceptable. Someone talks to you, you're supposed to respond. But I found that too, like in the middle of political debates or whatever, and someone throws an opinion out, I'm just not even going to respond. Like someone says something nasty about someone else, I'm like, I'm not going to respond to that. I'm not going to laugh. I'm just going to try my best to be calm and try to just showcase that don't do things from my reaction. Because a lot of times we perform for others unknowingly. I think we'd all agree to that. I'm certainly guilty of that as well.
Yep.
Like, I'm going to try to get a rise out of you. I do that to you, this one.
What? You never do that.
No.
I'm sarcastic and it doesn't feel right. You do that sometimes, but I understand why you do that.
Get people going sometimes.
Yeah.
But I think in terms of what we do here at Painted Porch Strategies, these are things that we do all the time as human beings because, there's a certain way that our brains work, a certain way our bodies work. And then there's a certain point in life where you go, okay, I want to pay attention to how my body works. I want to pay attention to how my mind works because these types of things interrupt personal lives, interrupt work lives, work days. So what we decided to do collectively in terms of how Stoicism works is infuse these lessons. For Sierra, it's mindfulness. She's our mindfulness Sherpa for fantastic reasons. And I was actually thinking about you this weekend, Sierra, and how many doors you've opened for me in mindfulness just by being you, by talking about yoga, by talking about mindfulness, meditation. Like that, I had this whole mindfulness chart that I created, and you were right at the top of it of like, oh yeah, Sierra, like maybe like it's okay to take a pause. It's okay to not react. So that's where Sierra comes in Painted Porch Strategies, whereas me, I'm the talker, communication style, 20 years of radio broadcasting. But how important communication is, especially if you combine mindfulness and communication. So you'll be a better communicator person to person in your relationships and at work. And then we top it all off with Amy's expertise in teamwork, because in Amy's career past and why she founded this company and brought us into it is she was sort of, I don't want to call you the middleman, but you were the one that had to translate coders, programmers, people who code, because they speak a different language than most of us do, and what a client would want out of the software. So you know how to facilitate teams and get everybody on the same page. And these Stoic lessons are such a big part of what we do.
Well, yes, because ultimately what we're trying to do and why we personally are going through this as a group, going through this 52 weeks of Stoicism, is to help us lead by example and to show and to teach others how to, lead this more virtuous, fulfilling path. I think Robin's so spot on with talking about you, Sierra, and the reason why you lead by example. And that's ultimately what we want to try to do through these lessons that we are learning, as well as from our experiences over, each of our specialties that we've acquired over the last 15, 20 plus years, is be able to provide ways for others to lead by example. So when you communicate, you're not communicating with regret, right? You're not
Through
having
anger
those
or whatever.
moments. You're being more mindful about how you're showing up or how you're interacting with others. And then through that, how you are collaborating with your teammates, whether that team is your work team, your family team, your friend team, your volunteer team. You have so many teams in your life, and being able to effectively navigate those. It can't be your way or the highway. That's not going to work. So how can you take these lessons of starting with something simple, like just pausing and asking yourself, will I regret this? Or how will this benefit me? Or what is it that I want? Who do I want to be in this moment? And then being able to create that nice pause and reflection so that you're not simply just reacting on impulse. With
What
what
we've learned on the porch is that this is not something that you just practice at one time or in one place. This is not like, oh, I go to work and I practice, controlling my impulses. This is something that if you practice in all areas of your life as it appears, it gets easier. It gets, you naturally become more virtuous. You become stronger in that area, just like building a muscle. The more you work out that muscle, the stronger it becomes. And then you can do more and more difficult things. So we are learning this all as we go too. And we help each other out by, Rob was helping to teach us on something that Amy and I are not as well versed in. So we know when to identify which one of us can really help uplift the others. And part of that is being humble enough to say, like, hey, look, this is one thing I suck at. Help me, please.
Mm-hmm.
And then we work together to lift each other up. And so especially as we go through the 52 weeks of a handbook for new Stoics, is we look at everything as an opportunity to get stronger and to lead a more virtuous life, regardless of what's happening around us.
Exactly. Because even as they say right on the front of the book, it's learning how to thrive in a world that is out of your control, and better understanding what you yourself can control, and how through tapping into that, to use your terms here, that inner power, it can help you just live a more balanced life, knowing that there's a whole bunch of crazy stuff happening around you. So how do you navigate that in a cool, calm, collective, and successful way? So this lesson, this again, ultimately was to help us just start to become more aware of our motives and our urges. So that way we are simply just starting by paying attention. They even say in this lesson, don't so much worry about analyzing the why behind the behavior. Just start by noticing, start by recognizing what it is, what that motive might be, or what that urge is. And then over time, to your points here, as you continue to work on it, that practice, that conditioning, that's when you'll start to be able to catch yourself before you react more and more. So that way you don't insert foot in mouth. So for you, did you find this exercise helpful? Was there any big ahas that you realized through this exercise?
I think it's the culmination of putting all these things together. As you get into the 30s, you're starting to realize the work that we did in weeks 1, 2, 3, 4 are not only coming back up, but they're being applied in real life situations. So it's been, if you do it every week, like we've been doing for the past 35 weeks, you automatically realize things that you didn't 37 weeks ago because you weren't thinking about them. And I think that's the greatest part as we go forward. It's, oh, this lesson's going to be in my head. So this week, even though we've already completed the lesson, there are going to be moments where I go, what internal desire is this action fulfilling? And I'm going to be at work, I'm going to be at home, and I'm going to be wondering why I'm doing these things. And it's becoming much more automatic to become much more Marcus and Seneca like, to quote our favorite Stoics.
Mhm.
Yeah, I agree. I completely agree with what you said, Rob. It's there's no shortcuts.
Nope.
No shortcuts to greatness.
Nope.
And that's okay.
That's okay. It takes work, but it's work that is going to be beneficial, not just for you, but for those that you interact with in the relationships that you have in your life, be it professionally, personally, or anywhere in between.
Yeah.
Well, wonderful. Well, thank you both so much for your awesome feedback and insights for this week, week 35 on our 52 weeks of Stoicism. Next week, we actually pivot to our final section of our book, which is on the Discipline of Ascent. And our first lesson, this is really now taking all of these principles where we talked about concept and started to analyze it. And now we're really going to focus on putting them into action and how we can take those previous lessons and level up in our lives. And for week 36, we have the lovely Rob, who is going to be leading us in learning how to catch and apply the dichotomy of control to initial impressions. So again, being aware, start with the awareness, and then how do you then take that awareness and turn it into effective action? So on that note, thank you so much for joining us. We hope to see you again next week.
And if you subscribe, you can get these weekly updates. You'll get an alert. You can follow along with us. We would love it. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. But I just want to remind people that we're so excited about this. We know that there's lessons we can all collaborate on.
And we would love to have you share your feedback as well in the comments below here in the video. Or if you want to connect with us a little bit more, you can sign up and join us in this virtual book club where we have a little bit more deeper discussions through an online team forum. So either way, we would love to have you join us through subscribing and watching, sharing your thoughts, or joining in the conversation through our book club.
How do they do that?
They do that by clicking on the link below.
Okay.
And on that note, thank you so much, and we will see you next week.